This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. We have spent a fair amount of time on the Terms of Reference podcast talking about data, big data, data collection, using and not using data. Well, I'm sure that we will continue to talk about data a lot in the future, and hopefully, maybe more importantly, the useful information that data creates. Today's episode focuses on the portion of the innovation spectrum in development and aid where the truly tangible, potentially game-changing product or service that someone or a group of people who has poured their blood, sweat, and tears into making it a reality is actually becoming a reality. For the 115th episode of the Terms of Reference podcast, I speak with Ryan Oksenhorn of the company Zipline. He's a member of the founding team, and he's the company's software team lead and also runs the flight testing program. Zipline is a complete rethinking of the delivery of critical and emergency healthcare products, like blood or vaccines, for hard-to-deliver places. They fly them there, on demand, within minutes of receiving a request. While this seems like a no-brainer in today's universe of drones, as you'll hear in the podcast, the Zipline team has had to solve massive amounts of problems to achieve the safety, reliability, and quality necessary for the service, to the solutions which have only become possible in the last few years. They're kicking off the launch of the Zipline service in Rwanda this summer. I was certainly inspired by the conversation, and I hope you will be as well. I spoke with Ryan on the San Francisco Peninsula. Hello, Ryan. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Thank you, Stephen. It's an honor to be on.
Ryan, where are you sitting today?
So right now I'm sitting in my truck located at our test site. Basically, our entire team works from a cattle ranch on the San Francisco Peninsula, and we've got pretty limited office space with about 30 people packed in. So, we turn our parking lot into mobile office space.
I love it. That's the way innovation happens. So before we learn more about why you are in a truck and why your office space is packed, you are the software team lead at an organization called Zipline. And why don't we start by learning a bit about Zipline, and then we can go into why it is that you're sitting on in a truck and what a test site's all about for you.
Yeah. So basically, what Zipline is, it's an automated delivery service where we deliver emergency medical products using a small electric drone. And we're able to deliver products like blood and vaccines to people who currently don't have access to those medicines in an entirely automated fashion.
So when people don't have access to these medical necessities, how is it that you deliver it to them?
Yeah, so it's actually an interesting story. So the idea actually came about 2 years ago when our CEO, Keller, was in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, and he experienced firsthand this problem that was plaguing their healthcare system. Basically, researchers implemented a way for remote clinics to digitally place orders using cell phones. Basically, anytime a patient came in needing emergency medical supplies like blood or rabies vaccine. However, none of these patients coming in were helped, right? These researchers knew, this remote clinic 100 kilometers away needs blood, or this other remote clinic 30 kilometers away needs vaccines, yet didn't have access to those products. And basically what these researchers formed was a database of deaths with thousands of entries. And so we decided that we could solve the second half of that problem, right? We know who needs the care, and we just needed a way to get them that care. So basically how it works is a patient at a remote health clinic is in need of something like blood, and all that a health clinic worker has to do is digitally place an order, much like you place an order for a pizza, just saying, I need blood now. And then 30 minutes later, they receive a text message telling them to step outside, and then pretty magically, the blood just descends from the sky.
So how does it descend from the sky? Take us through that process. I mean, it's sitting in a storage facility somewhere, gets on an airplane. Take us through that.
Yeah. So behind the scenes, basically how it works is in a region's largest city, we set up our centralized distribution center where we have reliable access to larger amounts of medical products. We keep them all on hand. And as orders come in, we basically prep those materials and pack them into one of our small electric planes, which we call zips. They're about the size of your own arm span, so about 6 feet long and 6 feet across.
How did you know I was 6 foot tall?
They weigh about 10 kilograms, and they're able to fly over 150 kilometers. And so when we receive this order, we pack it into the plane, we validate that vehicle for flight using some automated pre-flight checks, which I can get into in a minute. And then basically within 5 minutes, that plane is sent into the sky where it travels entirely on its own out to the delivery site. And then as I was just mentioning, when the plane arrives, it doesn't stop, it doesn't land. All it does is sends a text message saying, "I'm here." And then in a gentle flyby, it basically drops the package from the sky. And the package falls gently under a small parachute and lands in the area the size of 3 parking spaces, basically in the yard of the health clinic. And without landing, that plane just turns around and comes straight back home, flies all the way back on its own, ready to go, launched again 5 minutes later with more medicine going somewhere else.
You've, I'm guessing, strategically used the term small airplane instead of drone. Or is it one and the same, or are they very different vehicles?
It's a drone. It doesn't look like what most people picture when they think of a drone, though. We have a fixed wing airplane with, just 2 standard propellers. We don't hover. We don't take off or land vertically. And why? Well, that's a good question. And I'll get into that in a minute as well. But yeah, it flies entirely on its own, and it's able to fly, way further and way more reliably than any other drone out there.
So when you say it flies entirely on its own, so when they receive the text message from whatever clinic or whatever location, that also has a geolocation attached to it, and it's doing completely automated navigation, or somebody's flying it?
Yeah, so we receive an order from a known health clinic that we service. It's really as simple as the operator at Zipline's distribution center. They pack the products into a box that's labeled to go to that place. And then when they're prepping the plane, all they have to do is scan that box, and that loads the mission onto the vehicle entirely automatically. And then the vehicle is super intelligent, and it flies using a handful of sensors to fly itself entirely. There's no human piloting it.
Wow, I feel like we need to go down the rabbit hole of testing and points of failure and those kinds of things. But it sounds like you are Amazon delivery before Amazon delivery.
Well, I think between, us and Amazon delivery is that we're delivering items that people can't currently get right now, right? Every delivery we're making is saving a life that wouldn't have been saved. So there's, a huge amount of value in every single delivery we're doing. And then also the other big difference is that we're going to be operating on a national scale with one distribution center able to cover half of Rwanda, for example. Our vehicles are highly reliable, and they have a range in order of magnitude more than any other drone delivery service that's been proposed before.
So this is happening in Rwanda today?
We are starting to ramp up operations as we speak, and we'll start making first deliveries next month.
Wow. Take us through the process of what did it take, first of all, why Rwanda, of all the places in the world? Yep. And then secondly, what did it take to become operational? So, you're sitting on the San Francisco Peninsula somewhere. What did it take to become operational in Rwanda?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for us is that we don't want to be developing this technology in the lab. Our entire team is located on our test site, as I was mentioning before, and that's so that we can actually live, breathe, and iterate very quickly on a daily basis, basically, and fly every single day. But then we're also racing as fast as we can to bring a reliable and safe system to customers because they really need it. And we want to be developing something that people really like and need. And so why Rwanda? Well, Rwanda is an interesting country because it's known as the land of 1,000 hills. It's basically very mountainous, making transport very difficult. And so for a developing nation that has really difficult terrain, plus a tropical climate that gets, 2 rainy seasons each year, transporting goods and medical products across the country is basically impossible right now. So geographically, it's a very advantageous place for a system like ours, where basically we just fly over those mountains, right? We just go from point A directly to point B. And the other big thing is we're able to service more than half of the country with one distribution center. Our planes basically have a range so large that they're able to traverse halfway across the country and back. And then the other big thing about Rwanda is basically everyone we've been working with there has been awesome. Their government is super motivated, super fast-paced, and, just really looking out for themselves. They know they need this and they really want this. And so everyone we've worked with has been, basically working as hard as they can to support this effort.
So take us maybe through that process, because I'm thinking of some of our listeners out there who are either makers or have a similar kind of service or something they want to deliver, and they're kind of salivating that one, you have access to, you've got the licensing, you've got you've got the approvals. What did it take? Like, what was the initial conversation like? Did you just call up the Ministry of Health and say, "Hey, we've got this cool thing. You should probably buy it"?
Well, so the biggest thing has just been our credibility. A lot of people talk about doing drone delivery, and a lot of people will put on public demos of it. But instead of doing any of that, we've basically been working under the radar for over 2 years now, developing an awesome solution that actually works in the real world. So this is everything from the technical challenges of, how do you make sure that the system still works even if it's downpouring, or even if there are windstorms, or even when the internet or power goes out. And then all of the details, like how do you make sure it's safe, right? We hold ourselves to the same standard of safety as commercial airliners do. And so basically all of those high bars that we set for ourselves made negotiation and discussion with regulators and governments just so much easier. We've also designed the system to be affordable for these governments. We're basically the exact same cost that they're paying now to have motorcycles attempt to deliver, except we provide a much better service, because right now they're paying a motorcycle to try to deliver, and more than half the time that motorcycle has to turn around and come back and doesn't make the delivery. We're also able to beat the motorcycle by an order of magnitude in terms of time and reliability, because we're just flying straight over the mountains rather than traversing rivers and hills and potentially downed roads.
Where doesn't this work? So you've been working, under the radar, as you say, for the last 2 years. You've dealt with weather, you've dealt with power outages, you've dealt with airplanes falling out of the sky. Is there a time when this isn't the appropriate solution?
That's a good question. Right now, I think cities have pretty good solutions, right? A UPS truck is basically able to pull up to an apartment building and unload a truck full of boxes very efficiently. Just because, right, you have just a much higher density of people, and you can situate a warehouse close enough to a city. So drone delivery in general, probably also just for medical deliveries, doesn't really make sense in dense urban environments, at least not yet.
Tell me, again, operating under the radar for the last 2 years, what have been some of the biggest hurdles that you've had to overcome? You mentioned one, obviously, weather's going to be an issue, power's going to be an
Yep.
issue. Can you walk us through sort of specific examples of those kind of oh crap moments when the plane fell out of the sky, and what you guys, some of the process about how you iterated to solve that?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is actually wind. It's really hard to picture. It's not very intuitive, but basically wind stretches or compresses the path that the vehicle has to fly, because the vehicle is flying through the air. And so in order to promise that we can deliver to a health clinic 70 kilometers away, since people's lives are depending on us making that delivery, then we have to make sure that even if the wind is disadvantageous, right? The entire way, basically the wind's fighting us, we still need to make that delivery. And so that's been one of the biggest challenges, is designing a vehicle that's got an incredible amount of range. And so that's led us to have to make plenty of compromises and design the system very intelligently.
Give us an example of, like, what's a compromise that you had to do. I mean, obviously weight's a compromise, or a range, or what's one of the one in your mind?
Vertical takeoff and landing. Basically, every other drone delivery service out there has some sort of either quadcopter, hexacopter, or transitioning wing vehicle that's able to take off vertically, transition and fly out to a delivery site, descend down to the ground, drop, and then repeat. Come home. It definitely simplifies some things, but you're carrying a lot of extra weight and you need a lot more power to be able to take off vertically. You end up with a vehicle that can't fly more than something like 10 kilometers. It's just not possible. Whereas with a fixed wing design like we have, we're able to take advantage of basically all the physical properties of a wing, and we're able to fly well over 150 kilometers. Now, that said, we've had to solve some really hard problems like takeoff and landing. Our vehicles, as I mentioned before, they have to be designed to be cost effective. We don't sell any of the hardware. We sell a service, right? We charge per delivery, but the system as a whole needs to be cost effective. And one of those big knobs is making the vehicles either cheap enough or last long enough. And so we've had to pour a lot of engineering resources into coming up with ways to launch the vehicle into the sky in a very gentle yet efficient way, then also getting the vehicle down from the sky in a way that doesn't damage the vehicle at all. So we can do thousands of recoveries.
I'm looking at, on your website. I did some research obviously before. It looks like you get basically like a slingshot, something that you'd see on like a aircraft carrier or something. Is that, I characterize that correctly?
Yeah, so for our launcher, we basically have a large mechanical, I guess you can call it a slingshot. Yeah, we basically hurl the vehicle into the sky at over 100 kilometers an hour, 0 to 100 in half a second, and we're able to launch every 30 seconds.
That's fantastic. What's your anticipation for being for delivery in Rwanda as you sort of open the door next month? Is it going to be every 30 seconds? Do you have a sense of what kind of rapidity of requests you're going to be receiving, or what kind of delivery schedule you're going to have to maintain?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because basically we're bringing a solution to a problem that's existed, but nobody really knows how the solution is going to be used because there is no current solution, right? Like as I mentioned, delivery will be saving a life that wasn't previously being saved. So initially, when we first start next month, we're going to ramp up over the first few weeks, taking on more and more deliveries per day. But the system's designed to be able to handle well over 100 deliveries per day. So basically, each and every clinic that we're delivering to, they'll go from receiving deliveries once or twice a year to once or twice per day.
That's obviously game changing. And what does it look like in Rwanda right now? I mean, you have people on the ground there. You've set up a warehouse. Yep. You've got hundreds of these vehicles sitting there. Or?
Yeah, so we basically we operate with 15 vehicles from one of these distribution sites. Those vehicles, they fly very fast. They're designed to make it, halfway across the country and back as quickly and efficiently as possible. And so each vehicle performs, a handful of deliveries per day. They're fully electric, so the vehicle lands, we swap out the battery and put a new fully charged battery in, and it's ready to go again. The awesome thing about the design of the system is that all of the infrastructure is located in one place, just in that centralized city at our distribution site. And so by definition, we're delivering to remote clinics that don't have infrastructure to currently receive deliveries. So we don't have to install anything at those sites, right? We literally just drop from the sky and drop a package into their backyard.
Right. So I want to shift gears and just talk about, how is Zipline structured? Are you a nonprofit, for-profit, a social enterprise, you a B Corp?
We're a for-profit company.
And you've said a couple of times that you charge per delivery. How is that calculated? Or how, are you basically invoicing on a monthly basis again to the Ministry of Health, or how does that work?
So the specifics vary per customer, but it basically, like at the simplest level, you can think of it as a cost per delivery, where depending on, the terms of the agreement, we're either taking over a set number of deliveries or some guaranteed number of deliveries. And then we work with both governments directly and various aid organizations.
Mm.
As I mentioned before, we basically designed the system to be cost effective for these countries.
And so, going down the rabbit hole a little bit, just thinking from a business perspective, what about the liability issues? You're delivering emergency medical supplies. Somebody sends a text and that airplane doesn't show up, or the package is incorrect, or it's the wrong blood, or anything. What's the thinking behind that in your company?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first and foremost, right now, as I mentioned, in Tanzania, they had these researchers implemented this trial where the remote clinics were doing exactly that. They were placing orders saying, we need this, we need that. But there was no other end of it. There was no delivery being made, right? The researchers were simply just collecting data. And so we're fundamentally taking on a problem that isn't being solved right now. And so, you can look at it as one way, those edge cases where sometimes, a delivery isn't made for some reason. But the way we like to look at it is all of those other deliveries that are being made now with the system that weren't previously being made.
Absolutely. I think, the vast majority of cases will always be, hopefully, success stories. I'm just wondering if there's any thinking in your leadership or structurally about those cases, because things can get litigious, or all you need is one action group to say, hey, you promised something, and it didn't happen. So
yep. And the simple answer is really we just send another plane, right? Like the cost per delivery is cheap enough, and we have 15 of these planes. They're flying on their own. And so if a vehicle detects some problem and decides to come home early, we can just queue up another vehicle and send it right after.
Maybe it's a hard question to think about now because you guys are just about to launch in Rwanda, but maybe not. What's the next horizon for you after you launch Rwanda? Obviously, setting up other countries will be a big deal. But what other types of services do you intend to tack onto this, or how do you see yourself continuing to grow over the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, so initially in Rwanda, we're taking on basically all last mile delivery of blood products for half of the country, starting next month, and then the plan is to grow and expand and take on for the other half of the country before the end of this year. And then in addition to that, we're partnering with UPS and Gavi, the Global Vaccine Alliance, to start trials for vaccine delivery as well.
So it's basically figuring out how to leverage the fundamentals of the service for a wider product range.
Yeah, exactly. Like to the vehicles, basically, whether it's blood or vaccines, they don't really care, right? It's the service we're providing is able to really carry all sorts of medical products. That's the beauty of the system is it's as we take on more products, we're able to scale, one of these sites to make more and more deliveries per day, making it more and more economical, right, for
Mm.
everybody involved.
And what about the vehicles themselves? Do you see that there's potential innovations and technology changes or
Definitely, yeah.
on the horizon where longer distances, more efficient, less energy use, those kinds of things?
Yeah, definitely. Well, getting back to your last question about what we see the next 2 to 3 years, we have plans. We're not talking publicly yet about where specifically, but we have plans to roll out to many other places, both in 2016 and all throughout 2017. As we've learned more and more about the problems we're solving, we've realized that more and more places on the planet have these problems. And it's not just developing countries. There are parts of the US that suffer from these same problems. For where we see the technology going, it's pretty awesome because we think that this problem only recently became solvable due to advances like, mobile computing, bringing the cost of electronics and sensors down. That's enabled us to build, a vehicle that's incredibly robust and reliable with avionics that are, essentially using parts from a cell phone. And then the other front is battery technology. Companies like Tesla are investing billions in innovating in battery cell technology. And we basically get to ride on all of their success. So right now we've got a range for 150 kilometers with a current battery technology, but you can imagine that as batteries advance in the coming years, we'll both be able to increase the range and increase the payload capacity of the vehicle, also while bringing the cost per delivery down significantly.
Mm. Do you communicate? Are you part of the communities, like let's just say like Tesla on battery technology, or part of a wider drone community that where you are both contributing your innovations and drawing out from them, or is there?
Yeah, definitely. We think, a lot of the problems that we're solving, we think will ultimately benefit all of aerospace. So both drones and even commercial airliners. The technology we're developing, as I was mentioning, is we're making something way safer than any other drone out there has ever been. And we think, some of the safety technology that we're developing here can be applied to manned aerospace as well.
Can you give me a specific example of something like that, or is it,
Yeah,
something that's
definitely.
public?
So one of the big things we do, as I mentioned, we get an order and we ship that drone out within 5 minutes. And one of the things that we needed to do in order to do that safely is we needed to automate our pre-flight checks. So basically, our vehicle goes through over 200 automated pre-flight checks in under a minute. An operator simply presses one button, and then a machine comes to life and qualifies that zip for flight. And then after that minute, either a green or red light comes on. And so it's things like automated control surface checks. So a common failure on vehicles is basically that a control surface will fail hard over. And what that means is basically you can picture the flaps on the back of the wing and tail that move to redirect airflow to steer the vehicle. In flight, sometimes those will fail hard over. What that means is it basically failed to an extreme position, which has caused many accidents in both manned and drone aviation history. And so what we've developed is an automated control surface check that actually uses cameras to accurately measure the movement of the control surfaces. And we're able to both detect failures on the ground before we put that plane up, but we're also able to detect wear and tear on the servos that move those control surfaces and detect failures before they actually happen. So we're basically able to say that This servo is nearing end of life and should be replaced before it fails in flight.
That is deep. You know, one of the things that I'm fascinated on this end of the phone here is, you know, you have a seemingly, I mean this in the most respectful way, sort of in a, you know, a bland title, software team lead, but your depth of knowledge and both breadth and depth of knowledge, both I'm sure in software and avionics, are pretty intense. Is that everyone on your team, or are you the grand poobah and you just happen to be the super geek, or
we're a team of about 30 people, predominantly engineering, and we basically assembled a team of complete experts. So operations and engineering experts from companies like SpaceX and NASA and Lockheed Martin, who have, you know, combined dozens of years of experience in designing and building aircraft for reliability. And then we combine all that with a really strong product focus. As I keep mentioning, we're designing something that actually works in the real world. We're not just doing a one-off demo. We're building something that will scale and serve millions within the coming months.
How did you recruit these people? How did you get them to come on board? I mean, yourself included. I mean, did you wake up one day and you're like, I know I need to go save the world? Because, you know, there's obviously other pursuits you could be using with the knowledge and the engineering background, et cetera, that you have. What's the draw? What's the reason people are coming and showing up?
So I think the really exciting thing about working at Zipline, it's a combination of a few things. One, we're working on a mission that actually is very important. It's a pretty common thing out here in the Bay Area for companies to say that, you know, oh, we're changing the world, or, you know, we have life-changing technology. And I think more than a lot of other companies, especially software companies that just make chat apps.
I was just going to say, you can say, come on, you're not just another blog or chat app. There
Exactly.
You go.
I think the mission is very motivating, combined with, you know, the technical problems that we're solving are incredibly difficult. And really, there's nobody else out there solving them like we are. And then the pace at which we're moving is just, it's amazing. I can look back a month ago and see where we were, and the amount of progress we made in the last month. I think traditional aerospace companies take years to make. And so one specific example of that is every 3 months for the last 2 years, we have released an entirely new generation of vehicle. So this is everything from the airframe itself to the avionics and software. You know, we're basically rapidly iterating and learning from our successes and our failures at our test site to design a vehicle that's going to work really well for our customers. And so the other big thing is just the amount of learning that goes on here. It's an incredibly satisfying place to work because we basically have built a team of such smart people with experts in every field that everyone is basically becoming smarter at a really fast pace because you're just surrounded by such impressive people.
And, you know, I'm again, sort of looking at your website, I think it's important to emphasize here that you're not taking a drone off the shelf. You're not taking a thing. You're literally like getting the 2x4s and sanding it down yourself. And you've built these things from scratch, right?
Yeah, not quite 2x4s, but basically.
Sorry, that was me being a Luddite. There you go.
No, but yeah, the thing we realized pretty early on was that no off-the-shelf parts were really going to work for us. And it really just comes down to the fact that nobody has done this before. There are no good solutions out there. This is everything from the vehicle to our own autopilot and software. We basically, you know, hired our own talent in-house and built a team of experts to build something unseen. And so the vehicle is made entirely out of carbon fiber, Kevlar, and 3D printed parts. You know, it's strong enough that you can take the wing and smash it against a wooden table and you'll leave a dent in the table, but you won't even ding the wing. Or you can reach into the vehicle and cut any one wire and that vehicle will still be able to perform its entire mission. So this is everything from, you can cut the power to a motor and we can fly on the other motor. We've got 2 motors. You can cut the antenna to the GPS and we'll fly on our backup GPS because we've got 2 GPSs. You can cut power to the flight computer and the vehicle will fail over to a backup flight computer. You can cut the communication to one of the control surfaces and we've got redundant control surfaces. And so basically the entire vehicle has been, you know, designed from the ground up to perform this mission better than most people would expect.
You are clearly an evangelist for this, which is fantastic. I'm super psyched on this, and I want to go take part in this. Where does the funding come from? Where, you know, who put the money down to get this thing off the ground? I'm assuming it's not the government of Rwanda.
So the government of Rwanda is a customer. They're
But are they
they're
were they a venture investor to
no, they're paying for their deliveries. They're strong believers in solving their own problems. And so we work closely with them, to make it affordable for them to afford. But in terms of the development cost, we have some of the best investors who have been incredibly supportive. So Sequoia Capital, and then Jerry Yang, and a dozen other investors have been supporting us for the last 2.5 years.
That's intense. So this is looked at as a real need, but one that has a real ROI potentially at the end of the day as well.
Exactly.
Any sense of when does that happen? When does break even happen or anything like that?
I mean, right now we're entirely focused on proving that we have a real solution that works for real people. And so we're basically developing as quickly as we possibly can to get this out. And so we're definitely not focused on the financials of it. Now, everything has been designed to be cost effective from the start. So each of our deployment sites will be you know in the green.
Two final questions that I ask everyone on the show these days. And one is, so obviously the majority of your information comes from your test flights, comes from your work on a daily basis, comes from the team that you have. Who else do you pay attention to? You said Tesla. You said as a battery manufacturer. You said other avionics organizations. Are there other places that you look to stay informed, keep up to date, learn who else is innovating, and maybe where you can borrow from?
Yeah, definitely. Some of the most inspiring are the different organizations that are already on the ground operating in these countries. I met many individuals and companies that are trying to solve this using much more primitive technology, things like motorcycle ambulances, or handheld small tiny little drones. And so we look to them as both inspiration, and try to learn what works well for them and what hasn't worked for them. Because basically, there are a bunch of solutions out there right now trying to solve the problem, but many of them have different shortcomings. That's really, I think, who motivates us most. At the same time, we're also excited by other companies investing in drone technology. Amazon working on Amazon Prime Air, and then Google on Project Wing. We're excited by that because they're just pushing what's possible forward. Every advancement that we make and that they make is just going to make this more and more achievable in the future. And so, we definitely we have good relationships with them, as well as basically every regulatory body that we can. Everyone from the FAA in the U.S. to the civil aviation authorities in countries we operate in.
My final question is one where I like to say to people, it's your opportunity to geek out, but obviously for the last 45 minutes we've been geeking out here. Is there something outside of Zipline that you pay attention to, or some cool innovation or some cool humanitarian technology that you maybe draw from that is completely unrelated?
Yeah, I think an obvious answer for me is definitely SpaceX.
Oh, wow.
I think right now they might not really be considered humanitarian, but I know Elon's goal is basically save humanity by colonizing other planets. Right now, we've sort of got all our eggs in one basket, if you will. SpaceX's long-term mission is to, spread humans to the stars. And so every launch they have is definitely very exciting, and the progress they're making day to day is awesome. But I'm also really just inspired by that sort of attitude of a guy that made billions from an internet company, and rather than spending it on a fancy island or a nice house, he instead poured it all into a few companies that he thinks are going to change the world.
Ryan, this has been a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you taking time in your truck. I'll let you go back to the testing of your vehicles and getting back to the team. But thanks so much for joining us today.
Of course, Stephen. It's been an honor.
You've been listening to the Terms of Reference podcast from Aidpreneur.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes.